pleasure to have with me Brendan Hodge, who's the Global Head of Pricing at Hyperion Technologies. Welcome.
Yes, it's great to be here.
Maybe before we get started, for everyone who doesn't know Hyperion Technology, if you could just give a brief overview of the company, what you guys do.
Yes, we are a industrial hard materials company, so we operate with synthetic diamonds and tungsten carbide. We have 11 plants across the world in Europe, Asia, and North America. And so we operate globally, providing all sorts of different tools. We've got 20 different product lines across the hard materials space.
Awesome. And when it comes to pricing, how did you end up being global head of pricing? What's your career path towards pricing?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing pricing for 17 years now, and it seems like everyone has a story about how they got into pricing. It's not
Mhm.
something that you study in university
Yeah.
and just step right into. It's something that everyone has a path. So my particular path is that I actually studied classics in college, so Greek and Latin. That's not a growth industry.
Yeah.
So when I got out of college, I determined that I would just look for an office job, and so I was working as a sales assistant. And my very first job out of college as a sales assistant, a lot of my duties were going out to a warehouse that we would send. I was working for a chemical company, and so it would be pull this study, pull this spec sheet, pull this documentation, and I would go out to this huge warehouse where we had these gigantic file drawers, and I'd go through and find that product and pull that out and take it over to the fax machine and fax it to the customer, and then I would Xerox a copy and drop it in a sample box with a sample and send it off. And after doing that for just a couple months, I went to my boss and said, this is silly. It's the 21st century. It's 2000. We
Yeah.
should really be doing this electronically. We should have a database, and the salesman could be on the phone with a client and say, here's the information about our product. And he said, well, I'm not going to hire someone to do that, but if you would like to do it,
Oh,
here's the
okay.
Amex card. Go get yourself a bug. So I went to Barnes and Noble and I picked up a book on database design and taught myself how to make a product database in Microsoft Access
Oh, wow. Okay.
and plugged it into the CRM system that our salesmen were using so that they could record what data they'd sent out to customers, and that kind of turned me into a little junior data analyst.
Okay.
So my next role was at Dell Computers. I was doing data analysis in the marketing department and building databases and Excel sheets and all those things people use to crunch the numbers. And there was a fellow sitting next to me who was in charge of a pricing team. And one day he had a problem in Excel, and I helped him out with it. And then a few months later, he came to me and said, I've been asked to take over a new team. Our task is that we need to price weekly 200,000 SKUs of software and peripherals, and we need to price them against competitions. We need to match Amazon and Newegg and these competitors that are online. And I've got 5 people. So I need a database. Can you come help design it? So I came to him and designed that database and learned pricing. And
Interesting.
a few years later, I was leading that team, and I've been doing pricing ever since.
Wow. Okay. That's a very unusual story coming from the data side. Very, very cool. Maybe that's also a good segue back to Hyperion. I assume the 200,000 SKUs was probably a good preparation for product complexity in your current job. But what are some of the typical pricing challenges that you have to deal with in your current role, like from an industry and company perspective?
Yeah. So one of the most challenging things in the industrial hard material space is that although we often say in pricing that you cannot do just cost plus pricing, and we don't. We try to price,
Yeah.
especially our more engineered products, on value and look at what does this mean to the customer. A lot of our value proposition is based on we are an alternative to steel tooling, and so we will often present customers with analysis showing right now you're using a steel industrial cutter or frac seat or a cast iron roll or something like this, and show them how much longer their tooling could last if it was made out of tungsten carbide or if it was diamond reinforced. So we do a lot of this value-based work, and yet at the same time, we work in a space where our key raw material inputs are a major part of our company cost.
Mhm.
Um,
And they fluctuate, I guess.
they fluctuate a great
Uh-huh.
deal. We're based on mined metal ores, and those can fluctuate by the actual ore can fluctuate
Yeah.
by about 100% on a 4 to 5 year cycle. And so when your raw material inputs are going up and down by that much, you must change prices based on the costs of your materials. And yet at the same time, you need to not just be a commoditized provider of tungsten carbide, you need to be selling based on a value and making that case to the customer. So taking that balance of value-based selling and yet at the same time smoothing out that cost curve, because we're owned by private
Yeah,
equity right
yeah,
now. They're very concerned about maintaining EBITDA
yeah.
and making sure that we can show that in up markets and down markets we can provide good margins. We need to have some of that cost-driven methodology layered on top of our value-driven methodology, and we do need to make changes based on cost.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great challenge. So it also actually means that you guys have been dealing with not inflation, but with variable cost and input cost changes, massive input cost changes, long before other industries as well, right? So if it's a 5-year cycle, yeah, which is difficult to predict. We hope
Yeah.
it's a 5-year cycle, but who knows, right?
When I came to the company in 2019, we were in kind of a down cycle.
Yeah.
And so we were dealing with a situation where our raw material inputs were getting cheaper and simply not decreasing price as fast as your commodity costs were going down was a win from a margin point of view. But then COVID came along and that made this cycle even crazier than others. So we hit a multi-year low. It was the lowest cost that we'd had in 10 years there at the bottom of COVID in summer of 2020. And then we started spiking up. So back even before other people were talking inflation, as the industrial economy started moving again, and we had all these backups in terms of
Right.
supply, because it is a very global commodity, we started dealing with constrained supply and costs going up, and so we're now getting to almost 2 full years that we've had costs increasing rapidly, and we've been having to deal with that environment.
Mhm. I want to come back to inflation a bit, but before that, maybe just going back, even not just talking about Hyperion, but your Korean pricing. Are there any particular challenges, pricing challenges that you think back of and think, those are your greatest pricing accomplishments, things that you helped to solve for your respective companies?
So I learned a great deal at Dell Computers and really enjoyed pricing there. I learned a lot about doing price elasticity based analysis because
Uh-huh.
we were selling
Oh,
online, and you have kind of the ultimate
yeah.
transactional environment where if you can get just $1 cheaper than the competition and people are on one of these price comparison websites, you could spike huge demands with very small pricing changes just by knowing where your competition was and your price elasticity on different. So that was a huge learning. From there, I went to Wendy's, which is a fast food chain. And at Wendy's, I think the biggest thing that I learned was about the trade-offs that customers make. Because when a customer is going through the drive-through of a fast food restaurant, they've already decided they're going to eat, and so you're going to sell them something almost certainly. The question is what you're going to sell them, and as you change prices on the menu, you change what choices people make. So the most fascinating price move that we took while I was there is if you're familiar with fast food, there's a value menu, and back at that time the value menu at Wendy's was items that were $1, and 50% of tickets of people who bought from the restaurant bought at least one value menu item.
Mhm.
They might not buy only value menu items. In fact, they almost always combine those with other things further up. You'd have, say, a mother would take her children through and she might get a salad, but then she'd get a value cheeseburger and a value fry for her kid. Or you might have someone who was trying to put together
Right.
a really filling lunch and they would throw in some extra value sandwiches or extra value fries. And we were dealing with a commodity situation where bacon was becoming significantly more expensive. And so we had to take the junior bacon cheeseburger, which was our highest volume item on the value menu. We had to take it up above $1. And we did a lot of testing. We did testing in specific markets to see what would happen. And what we found is that you'd shed half the volume off that product if you took it over $1. But it went to other items that were on the value menu. You didn't lose those sales. It went to other items. And once you took it above $1, you could take it up significantly and it would not make much more difference. So we took it to 179 within a year. And we solved our margin problem. And that also is probably the most relatable thing I can tell people about pricing
Yeah.
is I'm the person who took the junior bacon cheeseburger above $1.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of pricing challenges across industries then, right? So I'm counting here product complexity, online business, and dealing with price elasticities there, bundling and product upsell on a menu board and QSR, raw material cost increases and how to do value selling. So quite a bit of a repertoire of pricing experience.
Yeah, at a certain point, as I realized that it wasn't just that I had sort
Yeah.
of was doing something that other people didn't know how to do, but that I was actually building a career within pricing, and I was probably doing this for the long term. You start kind of trying to fill out your career, and that was one of the things that was in my mind when I got the call from Hyperion. Is I had done small to medium business pricing when I was at Dell, but that's not very different from doing consumer pricing. It's still very transactional. You don't have deep relationships, and you don't have that kind of large account focus. And so, coming to Hyperion, that was a chance to deal with contracts, to deal with a very industrial B2B kind of product. And I wanted to round out kind of that aspect of my career and be able to see
Yeah.
that I had dealt with different kinds of challenges across the board.
Different problem. Okay, a very different pricing problem. Um, Maybe if we pivot from kind of success stories to what one would call learnings or pricing bloopers or things that didn't go too well, are there any examples that come to mind where kind of you or your organization tried to implement a certain, pricing recommendation and it turned out completely differently than anticipated?
Well, there's the true sort of pricing blooper, which is there was a time while I was at Dell where in our a range of things that we had for software and peripherals were flat screen TVs back when those
Hmm.
were very. And there was a literal pricing error. Someone uh, missed a decimal point and set what should have been a $5,000 TV to a $500 TV right before heading out for a weekend, and we sold the entire inventory within less than an hour. And luckily the system cut off at the point where it went out of stock. We had the system configured at that time to take the item to just show it as unavailable on the website when you ran out of stock. But we blew through what should have been months worth of TV inventory on that, and that was a large enough loss that someone had to go to management and make the call. Are we going to are we going to pull back all these orders and refuse to honor them, or are we going to take like a $2 million loss on fulfilling these orders at just a completely unrealistic price? So there's that sort of thing which reminds you that you need to have no matter what your systems are, whether it's like taking an order from a purchasing agent and you have someone who's just keying prices into the ERP system, or you're running an e-commerce site, you always need to have those controls which will catch your own mistakes before the customer catches them.
Right.
Because customers are very good about telling you when you offer them a price which is too high, but the only way they will let you know that you gave them a price which is too low is by buying.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so that was certainly a lesson there. And another thing which I learned as we were doing pricing research and consumer research when I was at Scott's Miracle Grow, which was my next stop after Wendy's, is you have to really learn to filter the information that customers give you. So we did a study there where we had a vendor where you could put sort of pricing queries in front of customers, and so they'd get a card that would tell them this is this product. There'd be a picture would tell you how the product worked. These were products that were actually in the marketplace, so we're
Right.
just providing the information that you might see like on an e-commerce site or on the store shelf, and a price point and say, would you buy this? And we did a lot of research in order to try to zero in on kind of what was the right price for some of these products in the lawn and garden space, things like plant food and pest killer and potting soil. And when we took those results out into the marketplace, it turned out that customers were not very good predictors of what they would actually do when they were in the store. That I don't think that they were intentionally deceiving us, but I think the lesson there is that there is, especially in a consumer or transactional kind of environment, when you ask people to think about what kind of pricing decision they would make, they'll apply one set of reasoning, and they'll arrive at a conclusion in terms of, is this worth it to me? Would I buy this product instead of that product when it has these additional features? But when they're actually standing at a shelf in the store trying to make a decision between two different products, between you and a competitor, between two of your products, whether they should buy the product at all, uh, that decision made with real dollars in a real store becomes very different from the theoretical decision that they're making when looking at a marketing.
Does
And so
I
it really kind of,
uh-huh.
you have to bring that, either provide a reality filter
Yes.
or just know to bring that grain of salt anytime that you ask consumers what they would do.
Yeah, I agree. I would caveat though that also depends on the technique that you use for serving, right? So who you asking, if it's actually a real prospect, somebody that is thinking about purchasing a certain product, or just a random consumer, and kind of how you ask makes a difference. But I completely agree. As much as possible, you should always do live testing and
Yeah.
test things in a real life environment. Yeah, absolutely.
For real dollar decisions that people are
Absolutely.
making.
Yeah. Maybe going back to the B2B space and the current inflationary environment, how is inflation generally affecting your business right now?
So we're seeing costs are going up.
Yeah.
But really, the thing that's been interesting here is that, as I described, we had this inflationary cycle in our raw materials, which was actually very, very early before
Mhm.
we were seeing general inflation within the economy. So we were taking prices up very early. The thing that's been sort of dramatic for us over the last, say, 9 months, as general inflation has picked up, is that as a company, we had thought of ourselves as being very used to dealing with cost fluctuations because we deal with our raw material cycle. But it turns out that when you're dealing with general inflation among the wider economy, you're dealing with not just that raw material fluctuation, but other things that you had got used to treating as just at absolute rock solid, start to change. So we would start to see our contracting costs change, our consumable costs, things that we had never thought of as needing to go into a price equation, like trays that we use when we send products into our
Right.
sintering ovens. These things are suddenly changing very significantly in costs. And things that we had felt like you could treat as very reliable. So we have a large footprint in Europe, and for the last 5 plus years, electricity costs in Europe were right around 30, 40 euros per megawatt hour. Now they're around 400 euros per megawatt hour. So, I mean, the idea that you could have the cost of literally keeping the lights on suddenly increase by 10x is not the sort of thing that we had ever planned for before. And it requires that we start looking at factors in our costs that you would not otherwise look at. Because although we're used to managing our costs and talking about how those things cycle over the long term, these were suddenly things changing that we were not used to taking a look
Right.
at. And so we had to take a deep dive into the business and start asking ourselves, what kind of cost could change for us? And then which sorts of things can you really talk to customers about? And which sorts of things should we not talk to customers about? Because one of the really dangerous things that
Yeah.
we did know from the raw material cycle is, if you take a customer who is not focused on commodities and you start talking to them about your costs, the very next thing that they're going to want to know is, so what are you going to do when your costs go down?
Yeah.
And so you have to be very careful how you bring that into conversations, because anytime that you explicitly take a price increase because you know that a cost is going up, you'd better be prepared to have the conversation about what you will do when that cost goes down.
So it means it's not just about the data and doing the analysis, even if it's significantly more comprehensive this time, but also preparing the sales reps adequately for the conversation with the clients then, right? Yeah. So that all sounds like a lot of work. So how many people do you currently have in your organization that focus exclusively on pricing?
So we are a pretty small pricing team. We just hired a new pricing analyst, which brings our team up to four.
Mhm.
So there's myself. I have a pricing manager, and then we have two pricing analysts who are responsible for just loading price lists into the ERP system and
Mhm.
maintaining.
And you guys report to finance or to?
Yes, we roll through finance. I
Mhm.
report to the CFO.
Uh-huh.
Because we are going through a private equity phase, pricing was very, very important to KKR when they acquired
Yeah.
us. So they had a big say in, they wanted a pricing director, they wanted someone with a certain background. It was actually mostly KKR people that I interviewed with.
Yeah.
And we do have a very regular report out with ownership as well as our own leadership team. So it is within finance. I report to the CFO, but it is still a fairly independent function just because we do have that roll up directly to ownership. We have a board member, Mike Marn, who has a deep history in pricing. He's written a book and spent a lot of time in consultancy, and so he provides a lot of mentorship, and we do a lot of kind of one-on-one catching up on these sorts of things. So in that sense, I'd say it's a little bit the best of both worlds. It's within finance. I have that relationship with the CFO, but there's also a certain independence to it because of that sense of reporting to ownership and needing to meet certain guidelines that they have.
So it seems like also from a leadership perspective, also from an investor perspective, everybody's bought in that pricing is a priority in the organization. Um, is that correct, first of all?
Yeah, that is very much the case. That is the reason why the organization was set up.
Right.
And I do feel that that is one of the most important things. Is
Mhm.
that I've been fortunate for the kind of the third time now to come into an organization just as they have chosen to take a new focus on pricing and revenue management.
Mhm, mhm.
Just had consultants and done an engagement to set up a revenue management practice, and then I was brought in to be one of the first full-time employee as pricing manager. And Scott's Miracle Grow, similarly, they had done a project around pricing and trade, which is kind of funds that a manufacturer gives to retailers to support to do sales support activities in the store and with discounts and so on. And again, I was brought in right after that engagement to operationalize that and continue on. And then here it was due to the ownership change, they had just carved out Hyperion from Sandvik, which is a
Mhm.
large Swedish mining conglomerate. So they'd carved out this smaller company. They believed that the company had a lot of pricing power that was not fully realized, and so they wanted someone really focused on that. And so I feel like one of the gifts that I've had in each of those situations is that I was brought in a period where there was a really intense management focus on pricing, and that's really one of the things that allows you to succeed as a pricer is that period where management is very focused on it. They realize what can be achieved with pricing, and they have goals which they are giving the rest of the company, because that gives you that leverage where you can go to a sales leader or a product leader and say, you have this goal. We're all being held accountable to achieve this goal for the year, and so let's come up with a plan that's going to get you to where
Mm.
you achieve that goal. And just having that backing provides you with a tremendous advantage versus having to kind of make your own niche in an
I,
unwilling organization.
Definitely. I would also assume that you need to keep leadership engaged, and you probably also need to build rapport with leadership that is not totally convinced that pricing is the path. How do you do that? How do you do the with this deal with the skeptics and create buy-in in general?
So I think one of the most important things is that, and one of the things that I enjoy a lot about pricing and has kept me engaged for so long is pricing is really a discipline within which you have the opportunity to learn the business at a deep level. You need to understand the products that you sell, who buys them, why they buy them, how your products relate to competition, who the customers are, and how they make decisions. And if you understand all of that, you have the basis to form very close partnerships with sales and with product management and with marketing, because you really have a piece in each of their worlds.
Mhm.
And so you have, if you understand their point of view and why they're trying to do what they're trying to do, you can form that connection with each one of them. And then I think
Which is kind of like making pricing fit into their story, I guess.
exactly, yeah, they all have goals that they need to achieve,
Right.
and pricing can be a part of that.
Yes.
So I think one thing is to really learn the business deeply and understand how it is that pricing can relate to achieving the goals of each of those groups that you need to collaborate with. And then I think the other piece is you really need to bring something to the table. So in my experience, I mean, I came from the data side, and so a lot of what I bring to the table is data. And so helping marketers and salespeople understand um, this is what this is how your business works at a deep level. So, like an example of that, which I felt was kind of everything working together in the way you would most like it to work, is when I was at Scott's Miracle Grow. One of our products that we sold massive quantities of was garden mulch. So I don't know if you have a garden.
Yes, and we mulched ourselves. Yes.
So mulch is it's one of these very American products where you have your garden beds and you have your colored mulch. You spread it around your flowers and so on as kind of a background and to keep down weeds. And mulch is it's not that expensive. At list price, it might be $3.99 per for a 2 cubic foot bag. But when it's on sale, it might go on sale for um, 4 for 10 or 5 for 10. And so not only is that a significant discount, I mean that's up to a 50% discount off the list price, but there's magic in that 410 phrase because it gets people thinking in, oh well, I should buy multiples of 4, I should buy multiples of 5. And most people are bad at math, but they can multiply by 5. So they can think of, oh, well, do I want 15 bags or 20 bags?
Right.
And they know how much they're going to be paying, and they like that. So it was a very easy sort of sale to make. And Scott's had become, I don't think it's too strong to say, Scott's had become addicted to the volume effect of doing a couple of massive promotions each year with Home Depot, with Lowe's, with Walmart, where we would do these 5 for 10, 4 for 10 kind of promotions. And the retailers invested dollars in it. They cared about bringing people through, and we invested dollars in it because we used it in order to justify the footprint of having growing media plants all over the country so that you would have a short enough trucking distance that you wouldn't be trucking this mulch for too far.
Yeah.
So it justified our entire network. It was a really powerful tool, but they were also incredibly expensive, and it was important to justify to the retailer the amount of support that we were willing to provide, the amount that they needed to put in, and what the true incremental volume that we could drive via these promotions were. My team and I did a lot of analysis, looking at the seasonality in different markets. Because in lawn and garden, everyone will explain performance by, oh, will it rain that weekend, or what have you. So it's very weather dependent because you need to do your key gardening within an 8 to 9 week period. So we did a lot of analysis around how much true incremental volume these promotions ran and what the sales would be if we didn't have a promotion, what they would be at different levels. And we were predictive enough, we were successful enough in predicting what would happen ahead of time that it actually got to where when the salesmen were doing their planning for the year on what their sales plan was going to be and how many bags of mulch they would move, they actually brought me in to talk with the buyers at Home Depot and at Lowe's to take them through. This is how many bags you can sell depending on which weekend you pick, depending on which price point you do. You will sell this many bags. And getting in front of a buyer like that can be a slightly intimidating experience because they are very used to being listened to. And when you're there to tell them, no, you're wrong about how many bags you can sell. If you want to sell that many bags, you're going to need to do 5 for 10, not 4 for 10. And I can tell you that you will not move that inventory unless you go with the price point that I'm advising. It can be a tough conversation, but if you have the data, which we did, and we turned out to be right, it builds a huge credibility with the sales guys, and also it gives them something that they would have otherwise, which is the experts that they're dealing with on the retailer side are sometimes directors who are cycling through pretty rapidly. So they may have only dealt with like 2 seasons of lawn and garden. And if you can have someone who can come in with 10 years of data,
Right, some insights.
you can really provide value to the sales guys, to the retailer, and build credibility for our sales team because that's something that we could come in that none of our competitors would do.
Yeah.
That really allowed us to build a relationship of, we provide the data that allows you to look good in front of your customers.
So it's really I'm hearing, yes, you need the data, and that's your foundation, but you need to work with the leadership, get the buy-in, sell the story, and then also get creative along the way to work with reps and sales and other functions to get it implemented, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If you become part of their solution,
Right.
they're a lot more eager to work with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. That makes sense. One last question, and very unrelated, but if you could go back at the beginning of your career in pricing. You've been in pricing 17 years. What advice would you give to your younger self that is, having their full pricing career ahead of them? Things they should do, should not do, things they should focus on, worry about or not worry about. What advice would you like to have received back in the day?
So that's a fascinating question because I think one of the things for me is that I didn't 100% realize that I had a career in pricing until I was halfway into it. I felt like I was just doing kind of a challenging job that not many other people knew how to do, and that I would do that for a while, and then I would switch into something else. So I guess here's what I would say is that when you are in pricing, you have the opportunity to learn very deeply about the business and to collaborate with a whole lot of different functions. You're going to get to know product very well. You're going to get to know marketing very well. You're going to get to know um, sales very well. And you, if as I do right now, you roll up through finance, you will know finance a bit, but to be honest, you will know them the least. But at a certain point in your career, you will need to make a decision about whether you want to be a generalist and you want to take advantage of the fact that you've learned about all those other functions to make a move into a product or into marketing or into sales. And in that case, you need to think about the lessons that you've drawn from pricing that can make you really, really strong in that area. What are the things that you now know that a lot of marketers might not know, or that you might know that a lot of salespeople might not know? And you should, while you are still in pricing, look for a mentor on that side who you can help through the things that you have, who can help draw you into where you want to be. Or if what you want to do is go on in pricing, be aware that by the second time you take a job at a new company, which is doing pricing because you did pricing at your prior company, you've already made your career decision. And it's going to become a lot harder to go switch into another function by the time that you're on your third pricing job, and you've been switching company or switching industries even while continuing to do pricing. You will still know a ton about these other areas, but those all have a pipeline, and you'll be starting to kind of get out ahead as you're looking for a director level role. It's going to be a lot harder to switch to one of those other functions.
And why would you switch?
Why would you switch? You know,
Why would you want to switch? Right? It's such a fascinating area.
it is a really fascinating area. The thing I think you just need to be aware of is you will top out. So I mean, I report to the CFO. I don't think anyone perceives me as CFO material because I am deeply focused on pricing. So although I have less experienced peers who have less years in their discipline, who are head of controllers or head of financial planning and analysis, they are in the running to be the CFO, and I'm not. So if you always need to be gunning for your boss's role as a pricer, you're going to top out at the director or VP level, and at a certain point, depending on how much you want to move around the country, you'll need to start scoping out. All right, what companies in my metro area have pricing people who go one layer higher than I am right now, because those are your opportunities. And so at that point, you need to kind of focus in and think about pricing as a career, and as I've been trying to do, kind of rounding out your experience as a pricer, making sure that you've experienced different types of pricing, different types of industries, different types of environments. So at that point, you're thinking very much in the mode of a pricing career. And if you want to just take the insights of pricing and move out into something which can take you up higher within a lot of companies, then you need to sort of pick your off ramp while you're still credible as a non-specialist.
Yeah, I think we heard today as well that the CEO should be the chief pricing officer. So maybe there's a little bit of headspace still left, but thank you so much. We can all dream, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much for making time. This was super interesting, and yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll be in touch.